All right, folks, we're going to be talking about the Alabama-Oklahoma first round of the college football playoff. And Adam, you want to bring our next guest in?
Sure. So, like Chris said, Friday night is a rematch of an SEC game that took place earlier this year with Oklahoma and Alabama. Oklahoma won in Tuscaloosa, and now Alabama is looking for a little revenge in Norman. Well, joining us now to preview the game from Bama Central is Katie Winham. So, Katie, thank you so much for joining us, and let's talk about Alabama. After their loss to Florida State, to start the season, quarterback Ty Simpson has looked really, really good. Head coach Kalen DeBoer has been solid this year, and they're looking for a little revenge, like I said earlier. Versus Oklahoma. So, how can Alabama improve on what they saw the first time around versus Oklahoma this time in Norman?
Yeah, sorry for interrupting there. Really, the first matchup with Oklahoma was kind of strange in that Alabama basically doubled them up in yards. They have not been good at running the ball this year, but were pretty good against a really strong Sooner defense. But there was really kind of 5 key plays in that game that I think if they would have gone in the other direction, that Alabama would have won. Alabama had 3 turnovers, and then they allowed Oklahoma to have a big punt return, and then they also missed a field goal. And I think if any one of those 5 plays happened a different way, Alabama would have won that game. So I think it's kind of repeating some of those things you did well in that first game. I think the biggest key for Alabama, they lost the turnover battle in that game 3-0, I believe. That was the first time all season that they did not force a turnover, and then they did it again this past week, or I guess 2 weeks ago in the SEC title game. Obviously, they lost both those games. They've been a team that's been really good at turning the ball over so far this season, and so I think the defense needs to force some turnovers this weekend, and then I think Ty Simpson and the offense need to do a better job of holding on to the ball.
Yeah, well, they played like what, November 15th, so this is a totally different team from both those teams. Like Oklahoma. Didn't get to the SEC title game, but Alabama did, but they lost to Georgia. So I guess Alabama has a little leg up on Oklahoma because they haven't played in Oklahoma will be playing a month later, pretty much. Yeah, it's really crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, with it, Alabama's coming off a game that they just played somebody that they had already played this season. There was a huge gap between those 2 Georgia games. This one's shorter, so I don't know if there's really a ton different on these 2 teams besides maybe the health of some players, and that kind of goes both ways. Some guys that weren't available last time that will be this time, and then vice versa. Specifically for Oklahoma, they have R. Mason Thomas, I think, who's supposed to be coming back for them on defense, who's a big impact player. And then Alabama has some guys coming back from injury from the last couple of weeks too. And so, yeah, these 2 teams are pretty familiar with each other. I guess in some ways it depends on, how you look at it. Oklahoma should be a little bit fresher because they've had an extra week off, didn't have to play conference championship weekend. Alabama was just out there in another super physical game. But I think if you look at obviously we have a very small sample size. Last year was just the first year of the 12-team playoff. But I think every team that had the first round bye ended up losing, right? Or something like that. I think teams that have waited longer have not had as much success. So I think it kind of is a good period for Alabama, the kind of a little less than 2 weeks off they had to get a couple guys healthy, but still guys are kind of coming off some game action.
Yeah. Adam, you have another question? Go ahead.
So, I mentioned Ty Simpson, and he has had a solid year in Tuscaloosa. The first game of the year against Florida State in Tallahassee wasn't the way he wanted, to start, but he some incredible games he's had. So, what makes Ty Simpson a really strong quarterback going into this game versus Oklahoma on Friday night?
Yeah, I think Ty, for the most part for this year, has kind of stepped up in critical moments. I think that first game of the year was his first true start, or it was his first start in college, and he just maybe wasn't ready when the pressure came, when the mistakes happened, when they fell behind. And other than that, he's done pretty well until the last couple of weeks. But I think really what makes Ty so good and why he can be good for Alabama this week is that when he wants to, he can make some really incredible throws that other quarterbacks just don't make. The problem is lately he hasn't been making those throws as much. I think for him, it's really going to come down to what kind of protection he gets from the offensive line, and then if he can make good decisions with the ball. Because like I talked about in that last matchup with Oklahoma, they turned it over 3 times, which one of those was, I believe, a sack fumble, and then he had a pick 6 early on. And then the other turnover was on special teams. So all 3 of them weren't on him, but he's got to make good decisions with the ball. And that's not just turnovers. That's also sacks. That's getting rid of the ball when he needs to and not trying to make the hero play and just make the right play that's going to either gain yards for his team or certainly not lose them, because Oklahoma has the type of defense that you don't want to get behind the sticks against just because they have a really strong defensive front, defense as a whole.
Yeah, is it great to have your coach not being picked by any teams? Because I heard Michigan wanted your coach, and I'm glad he's staying in Tuscaloosa, because that's something that you don't want to mess up right now with the college football playoff, having a coach thinking about another program and have a coach Friday night. So now he could focus on what he's doing, and, that's a great thing. Yeah,
for sure. It's always hard to take coaches at their words in this necessarily because, obviously Alabama's most decorated coach is Nick Saban, and he, before he came to Alabama, said he wasn't going to leave the Dolphins and come to Alabama. And what did he do? He came to Alabama. So Kalen DeBoer released a statement yesterday that said he was very happy in Tuscaloosa. He was asked directly today at our press conference, were you planning or not? Are you planning? Are you going to be the Alabama head coach next year? He kind of danced around it, was asked again. So is that a yes? And then he said yes. So, yeah, that is good if that's true and he's really locked in, which he seems to be. I probably wouldn't want to go to Michigan right now, and just kind of the hot mess that program has been over the last couple of years. I mean, it's hard to say that because they won a national title 2 years ago, but just some of the off-the-field drama that in some ways the Michigan job would make sense for him. He's a Midwestern guy, has spent a lot of time in his coaching career in that kind of area, but also – it wouldn't necessarily make sense to leave Alabama right now. And I think they're willing to fully invest in him. So it's good that he's kind of been able to squash those rumors so that he and the team can fully focus on making a playoff run starting on Friday.
Yeah, I think that whole Michigan thing is just weird. It went from like the guy lost to Ohio State, and also was it over the weekend or Friday or something like that? He just went bonkers. It's like, what the heck is going on with you? I know losing to Ohio State is hard, but geez, but I'm glad your coach is staying there, because I think you guys need to establish. He needs to establish his own offense and all that stuff. So it's like way everything goes, and like he did in Washington. He's taking over from Nick Saban, and people don't realize replacing a legend, it takes a while. So it's really a long time.
Yeah, for sure. I think he has not. Definitely last year, his first year in Tuscaloosa, was not able to run the offense he wanted, and just with the personnel he had. And I don't think this year he's fully been able to do it either. Obviously, they haven't been able to run the ball. So I think the more time he has, and like, it's not like this season has been a failure. Obviously, they're in the college football playoff. They bounced back from that season opening loss. They technically won the SEC regular season. Not that there's any sort of trophy or anything given out for that, but they were, the 1 seed in the SEC. So it's been a pretty successful year for year 2. I think, obviously people in Tuscaloosa aren't going to be super happy if they lose in the first round of the playoffs, but that's just life and expectation level at Alabama.
Adam, you have another question?
Yeah. So looking at the way, looking at some stats for the first go around in Tuscaloosa, I think what Alabama needs to do is stop the run by Oklahoma. And one of the things that they have to do is stop Oklahoma's quarterback, John Mateer. He had a 20-yard touchdown run in the second quarter in the first matchup. There are some Sandell had a couple field goals for Oklahoma in that game. So what are some keys for Alabama to get the job done in advance to face Indiana in the quarterfinals of the college football playoff.
I don't know. Can she hear us?
Katie,
Katie, can you hear us? I don't know. Something happened. Katie, you there?
I think she's froze.
I think you did. All right, let me pause it here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I think you hit on some of the keys with Alabama. That touchdown by John Mateer. He overall didn't have a ton of rushing yards, I don't think, against the Crimson Tide, but they obviously gave up that big explosive play, which I know they were not happy about after the game. So I think you want to continue to limit him on the ground. Yeah, he finished with just 23 yards rushing. And then kind of like I said earlier, I think you want to win the turnover battle. You need to avoid special teams mistakes. Oh, sorry, my computer slid off. Like I said, in that last game, they had the fumble on the punt return and they missed a field goal. When you're on the road, especially in an environment like Oklahoma in a playoff game, I feel like if you miss a field goal, that can really give the crowd a ton of momentum. And you're obviously missing out on points. And with an Alabama offense that struggled recently and how good Oklahoma's defense is, you can't really afford to give up points like that. So those are some of the kind of the keys that I'm watching. And really, if Alabama can have, another one would be if Alabama can have a little more balance on offense, just because they finished with negative rushing yards against Georgia, which is obviously never ideal. And so it puts a lot of pressure on Ty Simpson, and that's something he doesn't need on his shoulders right now, just because he seems to not be in the best mental headspace the last couple of weeks. And so I think having a balanced rushing attack will really help, especially it seems like Jay Miller will be back and be able to play for the Crimson Tide this week. So that's going to be big.
Yeah, actually, Katie, Chris and I, we were at the ACC championship game in Charlotte, and they actually had the game on a few of the monitors in the press box. So we were watching, and I was like, this is the same Alabama team that I've known, this year. And I will say, hoping Jams, he does come back, because he has been one of your strongest running backs all year long. And if there's a way he can get around that Oklahoma defense, I think you guys can win the game. So looking ahead, if Alabama were to beat Oklahoma, do you think they could give Indiana a really good game in the Rose Bowl?
I think they definitely can. I don't know if they will. I think we've seen this team this year, like they've proven, like by beating Georgia on the road early on, that they can compete with and beat some of the best teams in the country. It's just all about if they show up and play with consistency, if they can, win the turnover battle, hold on to the ball, force turnovers. This defense really, since the first game against Florida State, has been really good. One of the best defenses in the country. It's tough for other offenses to score against them. In that Oklahoma game, Oklahoma was scoring with short fields after the turnovers. I don't think they really had a drive all day where they just moved the ball all the way down the field against Alabama. I think they had one field goal drive. To start the second half that was 41 yards. The drive was 41 yards, not the field goal. But Alabama did a pretty good job of limiting them, and that's been the case for most of the year. I think it's really going to come down to, can the offense back the defense up? The defense has been backing up the offense time after time this season, coming up with a critical turnover or a big stop. And then the offense has just been struggling really ever since Alabama's win over Tennessee. From that point on, it hasn't been great. They haven't been able to move the ball with a ton of efficiency, which they faced really good defenses. LSU has a good defense. Auburn has a good defense despite their record. Oklahoma obviously has a really good defense. Georgia has a great defense. So they've been playing good defenses, but it's going to be, can the offense turn it around? And I think there's a reason Indiana's the number 1 seed. They've proven it this year. They beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. So it's going to be a big challenge. I think they can definitely compete with and beat Indiana. I'm not sure if they will. I don't know if I'd go out on a limb and make that prediction.
I got you, Katie. I got you.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great game on Friday night. And people don't realize this is the college football playoff, and they're going to have two teams battling each other. And I think it's going to go down to like a last-minute field goal. Somebody's going to screw up at the end. That's always something happening in these great games. Somebody gets a football, throws an interception, or they fumble, or somebody throws a Hail Mary over like last second, in the end zone for a game-winning touchdown. So that's why they play these games. So it's going to be one of those games. I think it's going to be, they're both teams are going to play their toughest, and they're going to beat each other to the point like winner. One team will stand up and go, "Hey, I'm going to the Rose Bowl," and the other one's going to be playing golf. So, it's just crazy. But Katie, tell everybody where they could find you, because I know you do a lot of stuff for Alabama. Where can they find your work?
Yeah, so it's on BamaCentral.com. It's also called Alabama Crimson Tide on SI. It's part of the On SI Sports Illustrated network. So that's where you can find us online. Bama Central on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at Katie Winham _. And then I also have a podcast that focuses on women's athletics at Alabama. So that's pretty niche. I don't know how that all.
I will come on your show to talk women's softball for Alabama, because I know how good of a coach Patrick Murphy is down there in Tuscaloosa. And Alabama is one of the top softball teams in the country. So I am volunteering to come on your show to talk